It's 6 p.m. on Tuesday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Kyo-ahn. These are the top stories we're following this evening. Korea announces a technical end to the MERS outbreak, the source of a health scare that spread across the country over the past 2 months. And Korea's benchmark Kospi managed to brace itself against the downward pull from China, where shares continued to slide for a second day. Korea touts its scientific and technological progress over the past 70 years at an expo that kicked off today. Our top story this afternoon, nearly 10 weeks after the first case of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome was reported in Korea, the government has declared the de facto end to the outbreak. For more on how officials say we can breathe a little easier now, Da-eun reports.
All 15 hospitals affected by the MERS outbreak have been released from special watch. On top of this, no new cases have been confirmed for 23 straight days, and the number of people in quarantine is 0. Given the circumstances, the government and the medical world believe our citizens can relax. The virus no longer poses a threat.
The battle is virtually over. Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn on Tuesday announced a de facto end to the MERS outbreak that claimed 36 lives and infected 186 people in Korea. The declaration comes 69 days since the first case was confirmed on May 20th. The Prime Minister encouraged the public to continue on with their daily lives without the slightest concern about MERS. Hwang added that he hoped to see citizens fully re-engage in the various economic, cultural, and educational activities they were involved in before the outbreak. Apologizing for the government's poor handling of the crisis in the early stages, the Prime Minister pledged to examine the reasons why, to learn from the mistakes that were made.
I will find out what went wrong with the initial response to the outbreak and take all the necessary follow-up measures.
The Prime Minister vowed to uphold the elevated watch level at medical facilities until the outbreak is declared officially over. 11 of the 12 remaining MERS patients still in hospital have tested negative, but 1 patient has shown mixed results and is set to undergo further testing this week. The official end to the outbreak is expected to come at the end of next month, as the World Health Organization suggests a 28-day wait-and-see period after the final MERS patient tests negative. Da-eun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Seoul's foreign ministry says all travel advisories for Korea have been lifted as of Tuesday. 7 countries, including China, Russia, and Vietnam, had advised citizens to refrain from visiting Korea. A special parliamentary committee tasked with handling the MERS outbreak has requested an inspection of Samsung Medical Center, one of the epicenters of the virus. The committee, in resolution on Tuesday, urged the government to scrutinize the steps the hospital took in treating MERS patients, as well as take stock of its own poor handling of the outbreak. The center was the source of infection for 91 patients, about half of the total. The resolution is expected to pass the full assembly next month. With that, the MERS committee, composed of 18 lawmakers from both parties, wrapped up its 48 days of parliamentary activity. Shifting gears, the 2 main rival parties are at loggerheads over allegations the country's spy agency used a hacking program to wiretap citizens ahead of the presidential election in 2012. The ruling Saenuri party said today that the National Intelligence Service is now free of the allegations after the agency director said yesterday the NIS did not use the program to spy on citizens. The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, suggested the possibility of a cover-up by the agency, which is refusing to submit a raft of recovered files to Parliament. The files were allegedly deleted by a NIS agent who was found dead in an apparent suicide earlier this month. In the wake of an international deal on Iran's nuclear program, countries participating in multinational efforts to denuclearize North Korea have expressed hopes for a similar resolution. But Pyongyang dashed those hopes earlier today, referring to itself as a nuclear weapon state. Our Choo-sun reports.
At a press conference for foreign journalists, North Korean ambassador to China, Ji Jae-ryong, made it clear his country will not return to multilateral negotiations on its nuclear weapons program.
We do not have any interest at all in dialogue on unilaterally freezing or giving up our nukes.
The so-called six-party talks to curb the North's nuclear ambitions involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, have been stalled since early 2009. In the wake of the deal struck by the U.S. and 5 world powers on curbing Iran's nuclear program, the six-party nations have been seeking a similar agreement with the North. Pyongyang, however, sees things differently.
The situation of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is totally different from Iran. We are a nuclear state, both in name and reality.
The North Korean diplomat defended Pyongyang's nuclear deterrent as a means of protecting itself from Washington's hostile policies. He also criticized the U.S. and South Korea for their annual military drills, saying the exercises are part of Washington's plan to bolster its so-called pivot to Asia policy by maintaining tensions between the two Koreas. While an official in Seoul has suggested North Korea may be trying to mislead its longtime ally China about its nuclear intentions, South Korea's top nuclear negotiator, who visited China recently, warned the North of the consequences it would have to face if it doesn't change its current course. Stressing the international community will respond firmly to the North's provocations, the envoy said the regime is at a crossroads between completion of its nuclear arms development and denuclearization through dialogue. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
And recent comments made by a U.S. intelligence official are lending weight to speculation North Korea could launch a military provocation this fall around an important anniversary for the regime. Our Connie Kim has the details.
The U.S. is expecting North Korea to launch a military provocation in October to coincide with the anniversary of the founding of its ruling Workers' Party. The prediction was made by a U.S. intelligence official on Monday who met with South Korea's ruling Hyundai Party chairman Kim Moo-sung, according to the party spokesman. The spokesman didn't identify the U.S. official by name. The official reportedly didn't say what kind of provocation is expected. The official was also said to have made note of the North's recent claim that it conducted a successful underwater test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile. In addition, the official was said to have doubts about Pyongyang's stated two-track policy of nuclear and economic development, saying the regime does not appear to be working toward developing its economy. The Saenuri chairman, in an address in Washington on Monday, called for cooperation between Seoul and Washington to entice Pyongyang to give up on its nuclear and missile development. Kim called for an alternative approach to the issue, similar to the way the U.S. used various tactics to bring about the recent nuclear deal with Iran and restore diplomatic ties with Cuba. He also expressed concern that domestic events in the North could influence Pyongyang's decision to carry out a provocation. And adding to the ongoing concerns, North Korea has recently completed an upgrade of the launch pad that propelled the rocket the regime launched 3 years ago. Military sources in South Korea say the regime could use it to fire a long-range missile twice the size of the rocket around the time of the Workers' Party anniversary in October. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The United States has designated North Korea as one of the world's worst countries for human trafficking for the 13th straight year. The U.S. State Department annual report on trafficking put North Korea in the lowest tier 3 of its 4-step classification of countries. It says the regime maintains political prison camps, sends people overseas for forced labor, and makes no efforts to improve the situation. North Korea is bunched with countries like Iran, Libya, and Syria in the lowest tier. The report notes how up to 120,000 North Koreans are thought to be in political prison camps and around 50,000 more work outside North Korea as virtual slave laborers to make money for the state. A group of forestry experts and business people from South Korea will pay a visit to Mount Kumgang in the north this week for pest control research. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Tuesday it approved a 3-day trip that starts Wednesday for the group of 8. Earlier this month, North Korea had asked Southern tour operator Hyundai to launch an investigation into why pine trees in the region are in bad shape. Hyundai led tours to Mount Kumgang until operations were suspended in 2008 following the shooting of a South Korean tourist by a North Korean soldier. South Korea says it will consider sending additional support for the pine trees when the exact reason for the investigation is found. Korea's top business groups saw their operating profits plunge last year, tumbling to a level lower than during the global financial crisis in 2008. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
Korea's top 30 business groups saw their profitability tumble in 2014, mainly due to sluggish domestic demand and exports. Their combined operating profit stood at $49.2 billion last year, a near 35% plunge from 2010, according to data compiled by corporate tracker Chaebol.com. The business group's combined operating profit last year was even lower than what it was during the global financial crisis in 2008. Some, including LG Group and POSCO Group, saw their operating profits drop by nearly half last year from 2008. The group's operating margin, the ratio of operating income to total revenue, also stood at 4%, nearly half of that recorded in 2010. Chaebol.com says the groups have enjoyed the fruits of favorable government-led currency exchange policies and stimulus measures effective through 2012.
Korean companies are currently in a crisis in which they are sandwiched between China and Japan. To overcome the difficulties, they need to maintain their product quality, and the global economy has to recover.
But there was some good news for these groups. Last week, Finance Minister Choi Kyo-ahn projected Korean exports would improve in the second half to a trade volume of $1 trillion. During the first half of this year, outbound shipments dropped 5% from the same period last year to $269 billion. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Hyundai Motor and its affiliate Kia Motors had the highest domestic production ratio among major global car makers last year. According to data from Japanese auto research firm Foreign, the Korean car makers produced a combined 8 million cars in 2014. Of those, 3.6 million were manufactured in Korea. That's a domestic production ratio of 44.8%, the highest among 9 car makers whose global production exceeded 3 million units in 2014. Toyota followed with 40%, then Ford with 38.4%. The group average was slightly over 31%. In terms of quantity, Hyundai and Kia came in second after Toyota, which produced 4.2 million vehicles in Japan. In this, the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence, the country is celebrating its achievements. The scientific and technological advances are in the spotlight at an expo that kicks off today. Our Song Ji-sun reports.
After Korea declared its independence in 1945, it didn't seem likely that it would be able to get back on its feet even after 100 years. But now, 70 years later, Korea produces some of the world's top mobile phones, semiconductors, and even nuclear reactors, thanks to its rapid economic and technological development. And the government has pledged to keep on supporting science and technology to fulfill the president's vision for a creative Korea.
Our economic achievements were made possible through technology. Technologies are advancing at a much faster rate now, and the success of our creative economy drive is only possible through research and development and investing in science.
The Prime Minister made his remarks at an event that kicked off on Tuesday to showcase 70 landmark technologies that highlight Korea's scientific history. From the technologies that have evolved over the past 7 decades to future tech projected for the next 30 years, you can get a glimpse of the past, present, and future. This is Korea's first automobile, the Pony, made back in the 70s. Today, Korea is the 5th largest automaker in the world. And this is Hubo, the first humanoid robot built by Korean scientists in 2004. At the expo, aspiring scientists can try to control the $500,000 droid.
It's incredible to actually see a robot. I've always wanted to be a robotics engineer, and this experience makes me want to pursue that dream even more.
From drones that seem familiar to opportunities to experience virtual reality or assemble a robot, there is much more to see and be inspired by at this event, which runs through Sunday. 송지선, Arirang News.
Korean markets closed a tad higher than expected despite worries the stock slide in China could pull shares prices down. The massive institutional buying had a huge impact on Tuesday's market close. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Korean stocks closed a tad higher on Tuesday after a massive amount of institutional buying helped keep the momentum going until the closing bell. Korean stocks started weak over worries about the Chinese economy as the Shanghai Composite Index fell 8.5% on Monday, the largest drop in 8 years. The Kosdaq fell 5.8 points, closing at a little over 745. However, the benchmark Kospi rose 0.29 points to 2,039 after finding some success in the last hour of trading. The total trading volume stood at 491 million shares, worth $5.5 billion. Industry experts say at the start of the day, investors were worried about the Chinese economy and the effects of a possible U.S. interest rate hike. But they managed to find enough bargains to turn the market around. Meanwhile, China's stock market continued its free fall on Tuesday as investors shrugged off efforts by regulators to calm markets. The Shanghai Composite closed down 1.7% after recovering from a 4% drop when the market opened. China's market slump is affecting countries around the world, fanning investor fears. Korea's Financial Services Commission said early Tuesday that it will closely monitor the Chinese market and the possible effects it could have on the Korean economy. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.